After I was stationed overseas, I sent Amanda a letter, asking her to marry me. We ended up tying the knot, largely influenced by the values of our church, where marriage and starting a family were strongly emphasized. From the beginning, though, her mother wasn't too thrilled about me. While she maintained a polite front in public, it was obvious she believed her daughter could do better. Amanda, however, felt that I was her best chance at marriage, so she said yes. The day before the wedding, her mother and I happened to be alone in the house. That's when she bluntly told me, "I don't really like the idea of Amanda marrying you. I don't think you'll be a good partner." I calmly responded that I intended to be a good partner, then asked if she was confident her daughter would make a good wife. Her mother quickly assured me that Amanda had been raised well and would indeed be a good spouse. She added, though, that she'd be keeping a close eye on me to see if I measured up. I simply told her she was welcome to watch all she wanted. Our wedding wasn't a big affair. Most of my old friends had moved away or lost contact after I joined the military, and Amanda wasn't exactly the most popular girl in town either. She was quiet, shy, and tended to blend in rather than stand out. 3 days after the wedding, we relocated to my new duty station, 1,000 miles away from her mother, which seemed like a fresh start for us. At first, things seemed to be going well. I got promoted 3 times over the next 4 years, and we eventually moved to an island in the Pacific, where we started our family. During our leave, we'd visit home, where her parents, brother, and sister lived just 5 miles from my family. But every visit home put more strain on our relationship, especially whenever Amanda spent time with her mom. Her mother was convinced I wasn't providing enough for her daughter and never hesitated to point out what I should have been doing. I was building a career in the military, which meant moving every few years, and her mom often compared us to Amanda's brother's stable family, criticizing our government housing in the process. When I was sent to Vietnam, Amanda and our 2 young kids were invited to stay with her mother, but I set up an apartment near our families instead before heading off. I spent a year overseas, but with 78 days left, I got injured, cutting my tour short. I was hospitalized in Saigon for 3 days, then spent a week in Hawaii before being transferred back to the mainland for rehab. During that time, Amanda's mother kept up the pressure, criticizing my career and urging Amanda to talk me into getting a civilian job. After I returned, the conversation hit me directly. Amanda had supported my military career when we first got married, but after 2 months of rehab, I was cleared for duty and stationed at a base just under 3 hours from home. Amanda seemed happier, and the pressure from her mother eased up a little. In late 1969, I was sent back to Vietnam on a classified mission. Amanda was understandably worried, but I reassured her it was only going to be a short trip. Unfortunately, that mission ended my military career. I was injured again, which led to a medical retirement. What was supposed to be a month-long deployment turned into 4 months in the hospital, 3 surgeries, and months of physical therapy. The scars from my injuries were tough for Amanda to cope with. She cried every time she saw them. When I returned, we moved into a rental house about 4 miles from our parents, and I started job hunting. Thankfully, a friend from church helped me land a job that was challenging, interesting, and paid well. I hoped this would finally make Amanda's mother see me in a better light, but she remained unsatisfied. I also got to know Amanda's brother and his family a bit better over time. At one point, I asked him if their mother had ever been as hard on him as she was on me. He admitted that their mom had never liked me and had even plotted to get Amanda out of our marriage. She repeatedly told him that Amanda would be better off as a single mother than staying married to me. Amanda's sister's husband, Stephen, and I eventually grew closer too. He never quite understood why their mother had it out for me but knew it was the case, and he was relieved not to be on the receiving end of her disapproval. Whenever we were at events like ball games or family picnics with just our kids, the 2 of us would joke about the whole situation, finding some humor in it. Everything came to a head the year our son, Andrew, graduated from high school. Just a month after the ceremony, he packed up and headed off to college. He'd always been a solid student and an impressive soccer player, which earned him a scholarship. About 4 months after he left, Amanda hit me with the news: she wanted a divorce. Now, according to our church's doctrine, divorce was absolutely frowned upon. Marriage was supposed to be for life, and couples were expected to work through any struggles they faced. So, naturally, I asked Amanda why she wanted out. She admitted that I had been a good partner and a good father, but she said she was just tired of being a wife and no longer had love for me. I suggested we try counseling or therapy, but she wasn't interested. Amanda and our daughter, Lauren, stayed in the house, while I moved into a small apartment. Every time I called the house, it was her mother who answered, and I was usually told that Amanda and Lauren weren't home. My calls often went unreturned, and I started feeling completely cut off from my own family. It got to the point where I would park down the street from our old home just to make a phone call. More than once, I saw them leave the house and climb into Amanda's mother's car. I still managed to see Lauren a few times a week, although briefly. I told her about these situations, but at first, she didn't believe me. Later, I showed her my phone, which had records of 28 short calls to the house, none lasting more than a minute. Lauren eventually confronted her mother about it, and Amanda's mother flat out denied talking to me, saying she hadn't spoken to me in months. When Lauren asked Amanda about our lack of communication, Amanda replied that as long as I was providing financial support, there was no need to talk to me. Despite everything, Lauren and I kept our relationship strong, based on honesty, but we had to keep it hidden from Amanda and her mother. I occasionally spoke with Andrew while he was away at school. Unfortunately, during Thanksgiving, he casually mentioned one of our conversations, and it sparked a huge backlash. He was told not to speak to me again or even bring up my name. After returning to school, he changed his phone number, and any letters I sent him came back marked as undeliverable. I attended 2 of his soccer games, but our interactions were brief. He'd thank me for coming, but there was no real conversation, nothing about family, his life, or mine. I kept going to his games, though, making sure he saw me, but I never pushed for anything more unless he wanted to engage. One day, when Lauren was about 20, she called me out of the blue. She wanted me to meet the young man she had been seriously dating. We met for dinner at a restaurant, and I could see right away that he was head over heels for her. It was also clear they were thinking about marriage. I did what any father would do and asked him a bunch of questions, and to his credit, he answered them all really well. At the end of the dinner, I suggested that maybe we keep our meeting a secret from Amanda and her mother, as I figured they wouldn't approve. Lauren surprised me by saying, "They better get used to you being in my life, because I want you to walk me down the aisle." I was genuinely moved by her words, and her fiancé chimed in, saying they were ready to deal with any resistance, and he'd be there in his tux no matter what. They set a date and started planning their wedding. It wasn't long before Lauren realized just how much influence her grandmother had over Amanda. Whenever Lauren made plans, Amanda would agree at first, but after talking to her mother, everything would change. During a family dinner at Amanda's mother's house, Lauren and Eric decided to make a big announcement: I would be walking Lauren down the aisle. The room went dead silent. After a few moments, Amanda's mother broke the tension by saying that if I was going to be at the wedding, she wouldn't attend. Lauren stood her ground, saying firmly, "It's my wedding, and if I want him there, he'll be there." She voiced her disappointment but stood firm, and she and Eric left the house. The next day, something unexpected happened. Amanda called me at work for the first time in 10 years. There was no greeting or introduction. She simply said, "I don't want you to come." I asked, "Who is this?" though I knew exactly who it was. She replied, "It's Amanda." I was stunned. Amanda, my ex-wife, calling me after all this time. It didn't seem real. "It can't be," I said, still in disbelief. "Who is this, really?" She repeated, "It's Amanda. I make phone calls, just not to you. But this is important. If you come to the wedding, you'll ruin it." "Ruin it?" By doing what the bride and groom asked me to do. How does that make any sense? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. Your presence will keep Mama from attending. She helped raise Lauren and has been there for her all her life. You haven't, she added, her tone sharp. I don't want you there. I took a deep breath and said, can you call me back after 4? I need some time to think this over, and I'd prefer to give you my decision then. Please, call me back. After a pause, she agreed. All right, I'll call you at 4. As soon as we hung up, I called Lauren. Honey, I have an idea. Why don't you and Eric take your mother out for dinner tonight? I'll cover the bill. I think it's important for the 4 of us to talk, but don't let your mom know I'll be there. I believe it'll help both of you and me. Lauren agreed. Sure, Dad. How about El Patio? Mom likes that place. How's 6:30? Perfect, I said. And let's keep this between us. It's probably best if your grandmother doesn't know where you're going. Got it, she replied. At exactly 4 p.m., the phone rang. I answered, and Amanda's voice was on the other end. So, what's your decision? She asked. Hello, I replied. I've thought about it, and my answer is this: I want to meet with your bishop before making a final decision. I always respected Alan before he became bishop, and I think his advice would be valuable. Will you meet with me and Alan? No, she shot back, I don't want this discussed all over the church. This is a private matter, and I don't need it getting around. But don't you think people will notice if the father of the bride isn't at her wedding? Won't that cause some talk? Plus, bishops are supposed to keep things confidential, right? Are you worried your mother will overreact? I told you, I won't meet with him, and I don't want to see you either, she said, her frustration evident. Well, I still want his advice, with or without you. I'll be meeting with him soon, and if you change your mind, you can join us. Let me know if you're interested, and I'll set up an appointment. She was firm. I won't be calling you back. I paused, then asked, so when can I give you my final answer? Can't you give it to me now? She asked, impatient. My answer right now is that I'll be there. I'll walk Lauren down the aisle if that's what she wants. If you want me to seriously consider your request, I need more time. We'll need to talk again. Call me at home on Monday morning. No, she insisted. Call me at work on Monday morning. All right, I will, I replied, and she hung up. Afterward, I called Alan, and we talked for almost an hour. He had known Amanda and her mother just as long as I had, and his advice was simple and clear: I look forward to seeing you at the wedding. When I walked into El Patio that evening, I noticed that Lauren had made sure Amanda was seated with her back to the entrance. I quietly approached the table and sat down next to Eric, directly across from Amanda and Lauren. Amanda's expression soured when she saw me. What are you doing here? She asked. I smiled and replied, paying for dinner. Isn't it all right for a father to treat his daughter, her fiancée, and his ex-wife to a meal? Amanda huffed. I want to go home. I've lost my appetite. Lauren calmly looked at her mother and said, eat or don't eat, that's up to you. But it's 8 p.m., and you didn't drive here. We wanted to have a conversation, and I thought this would be a nice way to do it, sharing a meal together while we talk. Amanda glared. What's there to talk about? Eric chimed in, how about the wedding? At that moment, the waitress arrived to take our orders. It had been years since I'd eaten at El Patio with Amanda, but I still remembered her favorite, chicken tostada salad. After glancing at the menu for a moment, Amanda ordered the same, just like she always did. I went ahead and ordered the chicken enchiladas. Once the waitress left, Eric brought the conversation back to the wedding. So, how about we talk about the wedding? He asked. I turned to Amanda. Did you tell Lauren you called me at work today? Yes, Lauren answered for her. Mom called to ask you not to come to the wedding. Isn't it my wedding? Lauren asked, her frustration clear. Yes, but you're making a mistake, Amanda replied. Nick shouldn't be involved. He left you years ago and didn't raise you. Grandma and I were the ones who did. Lauren looked at her mother, her voice steady. Why wasn't Dad involved? He never came by or called. Oh, but he did, Mom, Lauren said firmly. I've seen the phone records. Hundreds of calls, all lasting less than a minute, and I never got any of them. Grandma always said we weren't home and never gave me the messages. That's not true. Amanda protested, her tone defensive. I quietly reached into my briefcase and pulled out photocopies of the phone records. Here, I said, handing them to Amanda. Years of phone records, and not just calls. I have photos of every birthday and Christmas gift I sent to the house, all of which were returned. I'm sure you'll recognize the handwriting on the return to sender labels. It's your mother's. Amanda took the papers, her face registering the weight of the evidence. She flipped through the pages before handing them back to me, her expression unreadable. Our meals arrived, and we ate in an awkward silence. After a while, Lauren broke it. Do you still want me to tell Dad not to come to my wedding? Do you still think Grandma did so much for me that I should cut my father out because of her selfish motives? She's the one who kept me from him. If I could, I'd cut her out of my life. I put my fork down, glancing over at Amanda. That's your mother, Amanda. So tell me, what are you willing to give up so I can get something in return for missing Lauren's wedding? She looked confused. Give up? What do you mean? I mean, I said slowly, you're asking me to give up something monumental, something every father wants to be part of. So what do I get in exchange? Amanda hesitated, clearly unsure. I don't know what I could offer you. I waited quietly, letting the silence linger. Finally, Eric spoke up. Does Nick still send you a check every month? Yes, Amanda replied. Our divorce agreement requires him to pay alimony every month. Eric seemed genuinely surprised. He's still paying. We never talked about that. Yeah, he is, Amanda confirmed. I seized the opportunity. Would you be willing to change the court order and stop receiving alimony? I need that money, she answered, her voice tense. So, what are you willing to give up? Eric asked again. Another long silence followed. The waitress returned, and I handed her my credit card to cover dinner. Amanda turned to Lauren and said, having Nick there will ruin the day for Mama and me. He should understand that and just stay away. Lauren wasn't having it. Mama can deal with it, she said firmly. Now, tell me what Dad would need to give you for you to stay home. Amanda sighed heavily. I wouldn't stay home. You're my daughter, and I want to be there when you get married. I could feel the tension building, so I spoke up. Amanda, for 27 years, your mother has harbored resentment against me. To me, it feels like she's the one who destroyed our marriage, not my time in service or my injuries. So it's come down to this, either she attends Lauren's wedding, or I do. I'm giving you the choice. I paused for a moment before continuing. Here's what I'll accept. I'll stay away from the wedding if you show me an amended court order ending alimony forever, and if you agree to spend a weekend with me. Amanda's response was loud enough to catch the attention of nearby diners. I can't do that, she exclaimed. Why not? I asked, leaning forward. I've been paying you all these years like you were providing some kind of service, but you haven't. Why not deliver that service now? Are you still a virgin? I remember how close we used to be. The tension in the air was palpable as I pressed on. I'll make reservations at the Blue Lantern in Dana Point. No one but us will ever know. Eric tried his best to hold back a grin, while Lauren, clearly shocked, looked at me instead of her mother. Amanda paused before speaking. I can't. She hesitated, then added, what would I even tell my mother? Tell her that the condition for me staying away is you forfeiting alimony for good, I said. There's no need to mention the Blue Lantern. I glanced at Amanda, adding, and for your peace of mind, I haven't been with anyone in the last 3 months. I had a physical 2 months ago, and apart from a minor issue with my shoulder, I'm in good health. Amanda nodded slightly. All right, I need some time to think about it, she said. Eric, I said, I think we're done here. I stood up and added, I'll know Amanda's decision when she either calls to say no or I receive the court order in the mail, along with instructions on when to make the reservation. I shook Eric's hand, hugged Lauren, and kissed her goodbye. I gave Amanda a few seconds, waiting to see if she'd make a move, but she stayed seated. So, I left. 10 days later, a letter from the court arrived. It confirmed the spousal support order had been terminated, along with a copy of the new court order. I reached out to my attorney, who verified that the alimony was officially over and couldn't be reinstated. 2 days after that, my phone rang. It was Amanda. I've changed the court order, she said. Yes, thanks. I've got my calendar open, I replied. She was direct. Let's be clear, we'll go to the Blue Lantern for a 2-day stay. I agree to be intimate with you once during that time. I'll decide what happens, not you. We'll have breakfast served in the room both mornings, and we'll go out for lunch and dinner at nice restaurants. Aside from that, you'll stay in the room with me, available for as much intimacy as I want. I don't know if I can handle a lot of intimacy, Amanda said softly. I haven't been with anyone since you. I'll manage that, I replied calmly. You can be so difficult sometimes, she snapped. Look around church on Sunday, all those kids came from people being intimate. God made it pleasurable for a reason. And what if I can't do it, she asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Then I'll rent a tuxedo and walk Lauren down the aisle, I said bluntly. That's why we're doing this before the wedding. Okay, the weekend of the 20th. I'll make the reservations today, she agreed. You can tell Lauren you've agreed. Where should we meet? Send your mother out or something, I suggested. I'll come to your front door on Friday afternoon, grab your suitcase, and bring you back on Sunday while your mother's at church. Okay, she agreed. Later that evening, Lauren called me. Daddy, Mom told me she gave up the alimony. That's right, I said. I've got the court order framed and hanging in my bathroom. Did she agree to the other condition too? Lauren asked. Yes, I replied. She picked the dates and everything. She doesn't want me at the wedding, though. Lauren paused for a moment. Dad, I'm really glad she gave up the alimony, but I want you at the wedding. I could hear the emotion in her voice, so I responded, Sweetheart, I've been thinking about how important the ceremony is to you and Eric. Mike doesn't have any family close by to attend the wedding. He came here for college, and his family can't afford to come. It feels like your mom and grandma are more focused on the spectacle, things like flower arrangements, the color scheme, or whether your dress is traditional white. I paused for a moment, then added, Call Eric, and see if he'd consider having a simple ceremony back in his hometown. No frills, just a loving celebration. If you're both up for it, I'll take care of the tickets and arrangements. But I still want to be the one to walk you down the aisle. Lauren's voice brightened. Oh, Daddy, that's a great idea. I'll call you back. About half an hour later, she called me again. We're still getting married on the same day, but instead of Los Angeles, it'll be in Vermont. The next day, Lauren called me at work and asked, Are you still planning to take Mom to that place in Dana Point? Yes, I answered truthfully. I've always enjoyed being with your mother, and I've missed that. She's promised me 2 days of intimacy, and I've promised not to attend the wedding here in Lee. The next morning, my phone rang at 9 o'clock. The caller ID showed Amanda's number. I answered in my usual professional tone, Hello, this is Carol. What can I do for you? A voice shot back, "What are you up to?" "Excuse me, who is this?" I asked, a little confused. "It's Carol," she said sharply. "You cheated Amanda out of her alimony, and I think there's more going on. She's been acting strange the past few days. I checked the phone records, and she's been calling you. Did you ask her about the calls?" I responded calmly. "What good would that do?" she snapped. "You've got the phone records right in front of you. Maybe she paid you off to make you happy, and a few phone calls were part of the deal. Is that what you think? That she paid me off and a few calls were all it took? I don't need much to keep someone like you satisfied, do I?" I said, amused. "Maybe your daughter isn't as sharp as you are when it comes to these things." Carol's tone was icy. "I didn't call to chat. I'm calling to make sure you're nowhere near the chapel on the 27th. "First of all, let's get one thing straight," I replied firmly. "You don't control me. You might hold some sway over your daughter, but that's where your power stops. And next time you reach out to me, try a little respect." I paused for effect before continuing, "Just to ease your mind, I've already got a plane ticket out of LAX on the 25th, and I won't be back until the 30th. I'll be over 1,000 miles away. You're welcome to come to LAX and watch me leave if it'll make you feel better." "Do you realize how mean and controlling you're being?" she spat. "Your opinion doesn't hold much weight around here, and you've made sure of that." "Well, I need to get back to work," I said, dismissing her. "Enjoy the wedding. Will you be walking Lauren down the aisle?" "No, her Uncle Robert will be," she replied coldly. "Goodbye," I said, and hung up. Not even 30 seconds passed before the phone rang again, showing her number. I let it go straight to voicemail. I wasn't interested in continuing the conversation. My suitcase was already packed and sitting in the car, ready to go. Later, Amanda called to let me know her mother was at a church meeting and wouldn't be back until 5:30. I arrived at Amanda's house around 4:30. She greeted me at the door with a small suitcase in hand, looking stunning in a floral silk dress. She had on 2-inch heels, stockings, and her hair and nails were done up nicely. I complimented her, helped her into the car, and we drove off. I could have taken the route that passed by the church on our way to the freeway, but I chose a different path. Amanda didn't say much until we were well onto the freeway. As we got further from her home, she seemed to relax a little. "So," she finally said, breaking the silence, "what should we talk about? Tell me what you've been up to lately. My memories of you are old, and maybe your tastes have changed." "I still enjoy movies," she said. "Most of the time, I watch them on cable, but occasionally I'll go to a theater." We spent most of the drive to Dana Point talking about movies and food we liked. I remembered how, back when we were married, I used to rest my hand on her thigh while driving. So, without thinking much about it, I placed my hand on her leg. She jumped slightly, startled by the contact. "Amanda, don't be so jumpy," I said gently. "It's just my hand on your leg, like it used to be. I didn't ask for permission then, and it still feels natural now." She glanced at my hand but didn't say anything. I pointed out that there were some CDs in the glove box, and she picked one out, slipping it into the stereo. After a couple of songs, I felt her hand rest on top of mine, still sitting on her leg. We arrived at the Blue Lantern Inn, a beautiful building perched high on a bluff overlooking Dana Point Harbor and the ocean. I had reserved a top-floor room with a balcony. After checking us in and carrying both of our bags, Amanda looked around the room, clearly a bit embarrassed. It was stunning, to say the least. I had stayed in the same room a few years earlier with someone I thought might have become Mrs. Nick, but that relationship was just a pleasant memory now. At the Blue Lantern, I set our suitcases on the racks and began to unpack. I hung Amanda's clothes in the closet first, then placed mine right next to hers. When I turned back around, she was standing by the bed, her fingers at the top buttons of her dress, her eyes fixed on the bed. I walked over and gently wrapped my arms around her. "Relax," I said softly. "We need to head out for dinner. Do you think you'll be warm enough if we sit outside?" She nodded, holding up a sweater she'd brought along. We ended up dining at a fantastic seafood place right by the water, watching the sunset and the seabirds fly off toward their evening nests. It was peaceful, and the view was stunning. After dinner, we walked back to the inn hand in hand. Amanda had been quiet for most of the walk, deep in thought. As we neared the car, she finally broke the silence. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked, her voice soft. "In 1965, I told you I loved you," I began. "And I'm pretty sure I kept saying it, even up until we divorced. Just because you haven't heard it from me in a while doesn't mean I stopped feeling it. I've been harsh at times, I'll admit that, but I convinced myself you were being influenced by your mother. She's never liked me, not since 1964. But I want these 2 days to be enjoyable for both of us. They could be the last intimate moments I have with someone I care about, and I want them to be special." Amanda looked at me, her expression a mix of emotions. "I just feel like I'm part of a transaction. Like you've made some kind of deal with me, Eric, and Lauren. The deal was for 2 days of intimacy, but it feels like I'm being used." I sighed, understanding where she was coming from. "You have no idea what it's like being in my position. People in my situation don't get the luxury of privacy. You end up opening yourself up to strangers, and they touch and care for you without any real attachment." We stepped into the elevator with another couple, about our age. They were affectionate, kissing as the elevator slowly rose. When the doors opened on the second floor, Amanda glanced at me and said with a wry smile, "I guess they're in a hurry." We both chuckled and wished the couple a good night. At our door, I stopped, took Amanda in my arms, and pressed her gently against my chest. I could sense her hesitation, so I whispered, "When we go inside, take everything off. Start the shower, and I'll join you." I opened the door, and we stepped inside. Amanda took her time undressing while I watched. Then she went into the bathroom, and I followed. As she stood facing the shower, she said quietly, "If you'd prefer, I can leave my t-shirt on so you don't have to see my scars." "Thank you," I replied, understanding the vulnerability in her voice. She stepped under the stream of water, and I joined her. We showered together, though she was still somewhat reserved. Afterward, we dried off, and when I kissed her again, this time she responded, her lips soft, her hands resting gently on my arms. After a while, we were intimate, and when we finished, she curled up beside me and quickly fell asleep. I kissed her on the forehead and drifted off as well. At 9 o'clock the next morning, I heard a knock at the door. I threw on a robe and answered it, finding a woman there with our breakfast. Amanda hid under the covers while the woman set the trays on the table out on our private balcony and quietly left. "Come on, get up and join me for breakfast," I said. "If it makes you more comfortable, I can wear a t-shirt, but I'd like to see you." Amanda hesitated for a moment. "It just doesn't feel right," she admitted. "I'm willing to experience whatever it is you're feeling, and I want you to try it anyway," I said gently. "You've always been more comfortable with being naked than I have. I think it's because your mom is very private about her body." Amanda looked surprised. "How do you know about my mom's views on that?" "Your dad and I used to be close when we weren't with Carol," I explained. "He once told me that after 30 years of marriage, he'd never seen her naked. I've never known anyone married that long who hadn't seen their spouse that way. He said she would change clothes in the closet and they never showered together. She's very modest." "Modesty isn't about hiding from others," Amanda replied, her voice thoughtful. "It's about wearing clothes that don't reveal too much. Have you ever seen your mom give your dad more than just a quick peck on the lips?" I asked. "Your dad once told me he never got a real kiss from her. I've got to say, I'm thankful you aren't that restrained." I led Amanda out to the balcony. She glanced around, making sure no one could see us. The sun was warm on our skin, and the breeze was just right, pleasant and soothing. We started eating, and the French toast, sausage, hash browns, and juice were all perfect. As she dug into her meal, she seemed to forget about being naked, and I simply enjoyed the view. After breakfast, Amanda looked at me and asked, "What's next?" "More intimacy," I replied. "I know it might seem like I'm obsessed, but think about it this way. I haven't been with anyone in a long time, and this arrangement we have is only for the weekend. I may never get another chance with you. If you knew you might never have ice cream again, wouldn't you want to have as much as possible before Sunday afternoon?" She gave me a curious look. "You could always invite someone else if that's what you want," she said. "I'm not the only person in the world. You could invite the person you were with last time if that's what you prefer." I wanted that experience to be like the one I had with you, I admitted, but it wasn't. It didn't come close. "Now, come inside." We headed back into the room, and I put on some music. In the small space between the bed and the fireplace, we started to dance. Slowly, she relaxed, and before long, we were kissing as we swayed to the music. One thing led to another, and soon we found ourselves back in bed. I took my time, savoring the moment, not just for the physical intimacy, but for the chance to reconnect with Amanda. Afterward, we napped, resting before heading out for dinner. As evening fell, we showered again and got dressed. While walking to the car, I asked, "So, what do you feel like having for dinner?" "Protein," she replied with a small smile. "It's been an energetic weekend." We ate at a marina restaurant down at the base of the bluff below the inn. We laughed, talked, and for a while, it felt like we had never been apart. After dinner, Amanda wanted to go for a walk, so we strolled hand in hand at first. Before long, my arm was around her, and hers was wrapped around me. As we walked, she began to open up, sharing her thoughts and memories. "I think the happiest I ever saw my mom was the day you moved out," she said quietly. "I cried almost all day, but she seemed to take over the house like it was hers. Sometimes, she'd come home from work with this secretive smile, but I never knew what she was hiding, until I saw the phone records." Amanda's voice softened as she continued, "When Andrew told me he'd seen you at one of his soccer games, Mom said she'd stop sending him money if he kept seeing you. I didn't know any of this until last year, after Dad passed away. I thought she'd grieve for a long time, but 2 months later, she said, I barely miss him at all. At least he doesn't bother me anymore." I couldn't believe it. How could she say that about my dad? Meanwhile, I was missing you every single day and night, and it had been over 2 years. I kept us walking, sensing it was good for her to process everything. Eventually, we made our way back to the car, and she asked, "Can we go back to our room? I'd like to cuddle with you in bed." Back in the room, the bed had been freshly made, and there was a plate with 2 large chocolate chip cookies waiting for us. I lit a fire in the fireplace, and we undressed. We sat on the bed, with me leaning against the headboard and Amanda leaning into me. Together, we ate the cookies and watched the fire dance in the hearth. When the cookies were gone, Amanda turned to me and said softly, "Nick, I'm sorry. I've been wrong in so many ways, believing I didn't love you because my mom said I didn't, not letting you be a part of Andrew and Lauren's lives. But before I ask for forgiveness, I need to know, what are you going to do about it?" She leaned in and kissed me, her lips tender against mine. When the kiss ended, she looked at me and said, "I want you to walk Lauren down the aisle. I want you to give up your apartment and move back home. I'd like to marry you again." I blinked, surprised by her words. "Are you sure about all that?" I asked, half joking. "Are you sure it's not just because you want to be at the beach every now and then?" She smiled, shaking her head. "I'm sure. One reason I hesitated about this weekend was because I realized, I still love you. I knew the moment you held me, I'd melt," Amanda said, her voice soft with emotion. "I'm scared about what might come from all of this, but having you back will be worth it." Where does she think you are? I asked. I left her a note saying I needed to get away to think. She probably assumes I'm with Mark and Lissy up at Big Bear Lake. That's where I usually went when I needed time to clear my head. But she knows that's not where I am now. It hit me while we were driving down here, my car's in the garage at home. She knows I'm not alone. Amanda sighed. I'm going to have to talk with Eric, Lauren, and Andrew. My brother Robert thinks he's the one walking Lauren down the aisle. I'll be on the phone for days. Stop, I said gently, taking her hand. Our weekend isn't over yet. Let's just pretend the rest of the world is on hold until tomorrow afternoon. Right now, it's just Nick and Amanda. Everything else can wait. We climbed into bed and held each other close as we drifted off to sleep. At some point during the night, we woke up, and the passion between us ignited again. It was intense, deep, and raw. At 9 a.m, a knock at the door stirred us from sleep. I threw on a robe and let the woman delivering our breakfast in. Amanda stayed tucked under the covers until the woman left. Afterward, she got up, brushed her hair, and joined me on the balcony. We sat there, eating breakfast and watching the marina below. When Amanda was ready, she turned to me and asked, "Can we spend some time together one more time before we go? Out here, or inside?" "Inside," I said. "I'm not comfortable out here." "Please," she said softly, leading me back inside. We moved slowly, taking our time as we enjoyed each other's company. Afterward, we showered again and dressed for the drive home. "Do you prefer I wear a dress or shorts?" Amanda asked, holding both options up. "I choose the dress," I replied with a smile. As she started getting dressed, I added, "Leave the underwear in the suitcase." Amanda gave me a puzzled look before breaking into a smile. She put the underwear back in the suitcase and continued dressing. We packed up our things and left the room. After settling the bill at the front desk, we loaded the car. The woman at the front desk came out to hand us 2 more large chocolate chip cookies for the road. As we drove, I could tell Amanda's thoughts were on what was waiting for her at home. She was mentally preparing herself for the confrontation with her mother. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about what's going to happen when we get back." "I know," Amanda replied. "Mom's going to be furious." "Let's do a run-through," I suggested. "Pretend I'm your mom. You walk in, and she says, 'Where have you been?'" Amanda slipped into the role. "I went away to think." "You didn't say where you were going or when you'd be back," I replied, mimicking her mother's tone. "I'm over 21, Mom," Amanda responded. "Do I still need to check in with you for permission?" "It's just common courtesy to let me know where you are and when you'll return," I said, still playing her mom's part. "Do you always tell me where you're going and when you'll be back?" Amanda shot back, keeping up the roleplay. "Most of the time," I answered as her mother would. "But now that I'm back, I'd like to talk to you about some decisions I've made," Amanda continued. "The first one is that I want you to move your things back to your own house. You've been acting like you live in both places, but you don't. This is my home, and I want my key back." "If I do that, you'll be all alone," Amanda said, now back in her own voice. "That's my business, not yours," I replied, maintaining the role. "Can you be out by tomorrow night?" "No, I'll need help, and Robert works every day." "Fine, I'll hire movers to pack your things and bring them back to your house. Maybe the bishop can send over a couple of guys who need some service hours." "What's the rush?" Amanda asked in character. "Someone else is moving in," I said. "Who?" Amanda asked, her eyes wide. "Nick is coming back." "Nick?" she replied, almost in disbelief. "We got rid of him once. I thought that was for good." "You thought you did," I said. "But I know all about the phone calls you never told me about. Every one of them." Amanda was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking about the conversation that awaited her at home. I know all about the presents you sent back, Amanda continued, her voice steady. I know how you sabotaged every chance we had of patching things up back then. Lies, her mother snapped. He's filled your head with lies. He probably got the phone company to fake those phone records. And those pictures of packages with my handwriting? They were all part of his scheme. No, Mom. You did that, Amanda replied calmly. I suppose you prefer he doesn't walk Lauren down the aisle either. You're right, I don't want him there, her mother shot back. If he does, none of us will be there. Robert won't come, nor will his family. Judy and her family won't be there. And I certainly won't be. For my whole life, you've manipulated me into doing what you wanted, Amanda said, her voice unwavering. Not this time. Even if the only people there are Lauren, Eric, Nick, and me, it will still be a wedding. I stayed silent, pulling the car over and parking it. Amanda, I want you to think about something, I said gently. Eric's family can't come to the wedding, they just can't afford it. But they love him. What if we flew to Vermont and had the wedding there instead? Amanda's face lit up. Oh, Nick, that would solve everything. Anyone who wants to come can fly to Vermont, and if Mom wants to stay here and be all righteous, she can. Do you think Lauren would go along with it? I asked, handing her my phone and hitting the speed dial for Lauren's number. Lauren, it's your mom, Amanda began when Lauren picked up. Can you sit down and talk to me for a minute, honey? I'm about to make the whole family very angry. Do you think Eric's family could arrange a wedding in their town on short notice? I heard Lauren's muffled response on the other end as Amanda continued, honey, call Eric and ask him to reach out to his family. Then call me back on Nick's phone. Oh, and yes, we're back together, she added, loudly enough for Lauren to hear. Before they hung up, I heard Lauren's excited voice through the phone. We sat by the side of the road for a few minutes before my phone rang again. Amanda answered, and the two of them chatted excitedly for the next 10 minutes, agreeing to talk again in an hour once Eric and Lauren were at home together. When we finally arrived at Amanda's house, I noticed the curtain twitching as Carol peeked out to see if Amanda was back. She spotted my car and me getting out to open the door for Amanda. I grabbed both our suitcases, and Amanda suggested I bring mine inside too, so she could do my laundry and begin moving me back in. I followed her inside, where Carol was standing in the middle of the living room, hands on her hips, her face red with anger. Why is he here? She practically shouted. This is my house, Mom, Amanda replied calmly. Which means I can have anyone I want here. If you want to talk, you'll need to wait, I have to start the laundry. Amanda took the suitcases and headed to the service porch. Carol sat down in a rocking chair, the one she had brought into Amanda's living room after I moved out. I settled onto the couch, waiting. A few moments later, Amanda returned and sat next to me. I've taken care of the wedding, Amanda announced, looking directly at her mother. There's been too much anger and frustration about it being either your way or not at all. Lauren wants Nick to walk her down the aisle, and you've threatened to boycott if he's there. So, the wedding is still on for Saturday at 1, but not here. We're flying to Vermont, and they'll be getting married in Eric's hometown. His uncle, the bishop, will officiate. That way, we can avoid all the negative energy that would have been here. I won't be there, Carol said coldly. That's fine, Amanda replied. I'll let everyone know about the change of venue. They can come to Vermont if they want to, or not. Either way, we're having a wedding. Carol's face hardened as she said, I won't be here when you get back. Amanda met her mother's gaze. Can you be out by tomorrow afternoon? She asked calmly. What? Carol exclaimed, shocked. Do you have a place to stay? Can you pack up all your things and be out by tomorrow afternoon? Amanda repeated, her tone steady. Are you throwing me out? Carol's voice cracked with a mix of hurt and disbelief. In a kind way, yes, Amanda replied gently. We need the space for Nick to move back in. Once he's off work tomorrow, he can start bringing his things over. So the question is, can you have your things out by then? But you two aren't even married anymore, Carol protested. It's not illegal for us to live together for a week, Amanda responded calmly. What do you mean, for a week? Carol asked, confused. Right after Lauren and Eric get married on Saturday, the bishop is marrying us too, Amanda explained. This is just wrong, Carol said, shaking her head. I agree, Amanda replied, her voice softer. It has been wrong, and for that, I'm sorry. I wanted to believe that my mother would always act in my best interest. I trusted that your love for me would mean you were always looking out for what's best for me. When you told me I didn't love Nick, I believed you. When you hid his attempts to stay in touch, I believed you. When you said he hadn't called, I trusted you. But I was wrong. And for that, I've apologized. Tears rolled down Amanda's cheeks as she spoke. Carol sat in the rocking chair, looking stunned, as if she'd been slapped. I've always loved you, Carol said softly. Everything I've ever done was for your benefit. You decided before Nick and I were even married that you didn't like him, Amanda continued. Nick knew it. Everyone in the family knew it. How was that being supportive? How did that help my life? He's never been good enough for you, Carol replied coldly. And he still isn't. The church says I should be married, have children, raise them well, and stand by my partner, Amanda said. But my mother says I should only marry the man she approves of, only have children with him, and stand by him. Did your mother choose your husband? Amanda asked pointedly. My mother approved of Kurt, Carol replied. She liked him. She thought we should wait until he got out of the army before getting married, but she liked him. And did you love him? Amanda asked. Of course, I loved him, Carol answered quickly. Really? Amanda paused, her eyes narrowing. While I was away this weekend, I thought a lot about what I saw between you and Dad. I never saw you hold his hand. I never saw you kiss him. You pecked him on the cheek a few times, but never a real kiss. I saw you tell him what to buy you for Christmas, then complain that he got it wrong, even though it was exactly what you asked for. How did you show him you loved him? I took good care of him, Carol said, her voice defensive. I cooked, cleaned, and raised his children. I'm not good at being openly affectionate, but I loved him. You told me Nick was too affectionate, Amanda continued. You made me feel like he was doing something wrong when he kissed me in front of the kids. You told me I shouldn't enjoy being close to him. That it wasn't about enjoyment, it was just for making babies. Amanda paused, wiping her eyes before continuing. Well, you were wrong, Mother. Physical affection is one of the ways Nick and I express love for each other. It helps us stay connected. And one of the reasons I want you to move out is so that Nick and I can have more privacy. I want to be able to walk around the house freely because Nick likes seeing me like that. I don't want to have to worry about you listening in. I don't want to hear this, Carol said, looking away. It's the truth, Amanda replied firmly. If this is too much for you to handle, we can call the bishop. I'm sure he can send a few men from the congregation to help pack up your things and move them to your house. I don't want you staying here tonight. I want Nick to stay here tonight, and from now on. If you do this, you'll lose your mother, Carol said, her voice full of warning. Amanda remained calm. Remember what the Bible says. When you marry, you leave your parents and cleave to your spouse. That's exactly what I'm doing, Amanda said firmly. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to be supportive, loving, and allow us to love each other the way we choose. If you can't do that, then we'll miss you. But if I have to choose between being with Nick or having you in my life, I'm choosing Nick. You'll regret this, Carol shot back, her voice bitter. You shouldn't treat your mother this way. I brought you into this world, and now you're throwing me out. No, Amanda replied calmly, you're choosing to leave. I want a loving, supportive mother, but you've made it clear you can't be that. This is your choice. I'm choosing to be Nick's wife. He's the father of my children. He loves me, and I love him. We're both willing to love you and have you in our lives, but only if you can be supportive. You wouldn't even support Lauren's decisions for her wedding, and now she's getting married almost 3,000 miles away from you. That's your doing. At that moment, the washing machine dinged, signaling the load was ready to be transferred to the dryer. Amanda stood up to handle it, leaving Carol sitting quietly for a few moments. Then Carol stood, picked up her purse, and said, I'll have someone come by tomorrow to get my things. Will you be here to show them what to take? I spoke up, Amanda knows what belongs to you, but your things are your responsibility. It's best if you're here with whoever you send, so you can ensure everything is taken care of. That way, there's no chance for misunderstandings later. Okay, I'll be here, Carol said, her voice tight. I'll be off work by 5 and here around 6:30. All right, Amanda said as she came back into the room. She saw her mother holding her purse, ready to leave. What time will you be back in the morning? Amanda asked. I'll call before we come for my things, Carol replied. I expect we'll be here around 9 or 10. Amanda walked to the front door, opened it, and, for the first time I'd ever seen, extended her arms to offer her mother a hug. But Carol just walked right past her. I don't hug, Carol said flatly. I know, Amanda replied, her voice soft and full of emotion. I've wanted a hug from you since I was a little girl. Carol didn't respond, walking out the door and getting into her car. We stood there together, watching her drive away. I put my arm around Amanda, holding her close as her mother disappeared down the street. Afterward, we drove to my apartment, and I packed enough things for work the next day. We stopped at a store to buy some boxes, some for my stuff and some for Carol to use as she moved out. When we got back to Amanda's house, it felt different. For the first time in almost 10 years, Amanda made dinner for us. We sat at the table, ate together, and then did the dishes side by side, talking like we hadn't in a long time. Around 8 o'clock, the phone rang. For a moment, I felt the urge to answer it, but I didn't. It couldn't be for me, only 2 people knew I was back, and Carol definitely wouldn't be calling to chat with me. Amanda answered, and it was Andrew on the other end, clearly upset after hearing from Carol. Amanda spent nearly half an hour on the phone with him. For the first 15 minutes, I sat on the couch while she sat by the front door, but then she moved and settled into my lap, my arms wrapped around her. Tears fell on my chest as Andrew, still angry, repeated all the lies Carol had fed him over the years, telling Amanda how wrong she was for loving me. By the end of the conversation, it was clear that Andrew wasn't coming to the wedding. Amanda assured him that we were back together, and despite everything, we still loved each other. But Andrew made it known, he wasn't coming to the wedding, and he wouldn't come home for a visit as long as I was living there. A little after 9, the phone rang again. This time, it was Amanda's brother, Robert. She was still in my lap, her face resting against my chest as she answered the call. I could hear Robert's voice through the phone as he shared how their mother had called him and how he reacted to the news. Robert talked about how fortunate he felt that Mama hadn't made him her target and how bad he felt about what happened between us. He shared that he and his wife had already booked their flights to Vermont, they would be at the wedding. Robert also offered to help Carol pack in the morning. He said some supportive words to Amanda and asked her to tell me, "Welcome back." By 10, we were getting ready for bed. Amanda went through her usual routine, but when she reached for her nightgown, she paused. Holding it for a moment, she then hung it on the back of the door. She turned to me, arms open, and asked, "Like what you see?" I smiled and answered, "Yes, I do. Let's go to bed." We were playfully noisy, even though no one else was in the house. The alarm woke us up at 6 the next morning. I got out of bed and headed for the shower. Amanda didn't need to get up that early, but when I was in the shower, she decided to join me. We laughed and played as we washed up together. Afterward, while I dressed, she made breakfast. French toast was waiting on the table with a jar of peanut butter set beside my plate. I sat down to eat, fully dressed, while Amanda stayed comfortable and kept me company. It felt so good to be home again and to notice the changes happening. Amanda spent the day making phone calls and sending emails to everyone who had been invited to the wedding. When Robert and Carol arrived to pack up Carol's things, Amanda greeted them. Carol didn't say a word to her daughter. It took Robert less than 90 minutes to get everything packed. Amanda made lemonade, and Robert drank a glass while Amanda continued making her calls. She occasionally heard Carol grumbling or sighing, but Amanda paid it no mind. Some of the invited guests made plans to fly to Vermont, while others chose not to attend. For those who asked, Amanda was honest about why the wedding had been moved. Our flight to Vermont was scheduled for 4 p.m. on Friday. It was after midnight by the time we landed in Vermont and nearly 3 a.m. when we finally got to our hotel and into bed. Even though we were still a little tired when we arrived at the church around noon the next day, everything was falling into place. I was in a small room helping with last-minute preparations for the ceremony when Robert suddenly burst in. "You're not going to believe who's here," he exclaimed. "Okay, who is it?" I asked, curious. Robert grabbed my arm and led me to the door that led into the chapel. I peeked through the small window and nearly gasped. Sitting in the front row, on the bride's side, was Carol. She was dressed in a nice lavender outfit and smiling brightly. "Does Lauren or Amanda know she's here?" I asked. "No," Robert replied. "Since you and I are the only ones out here who know her, I don't think they do." We returned to the room where Amanda and Lauren were getting ready. I knocked, and Amanda opened the door. "I need to talk to both of you right now, it's urgent." "Okay, come in," Amanda said, holding the door open. When I stepped in, I saw Lauren as a bride for the first time. She looked radiant, absolutely stunning. Amanda looked beautiful too, though her dress was more understated. I gestured for Amanda to sit down. "Amanda, I need you to sit for a moment," I said. She sat down next to Lauren. "Carol is sitting in the front row, on the bride's side," I continued. Lauren's eyes widened, and she jumped up. "No way," she exclaimed. "Yes," I confirmed. Robert saw her come in. Neither of us has spoken to her, but we both saw her. "I'll be right back," Amanda said, getting up and leaving the room to confront her mother. Lauren looked at me, her eyes filled with questions. "What does it mean?" I smiled softly. "I think it means your grandmother has decided that she loves you and your mom more than she cares about being right. But Amanda's finding out the answer to that question right now." Lauren took a deep breath and smiled, then asked, "Do I look good enough to marry Daddy?" "You're the second most beautiful bride I've ever seen," I said, giving her a proud smile. We hugged just as there was a knock at the door. I opened it a crack and saw Andrew standing there. "Dad, I came to apologize to Lauren," he said, his voice tentative. "But since you're here, may I apologize to both of you?" I opened the door, and Andrew immediately embraced Lauren. He apologized for not believing her or Amanda and for his actions. Moments later, Amanda returned to the room and was pulled into the circle of hugs, tears, and heartfelt apologies. Curious, I asked Andrew, "Less than a week ago, you said you'd never speak to your mom again. What changed?" "Grandma called me," he explained. "She told me everything she'd done. She asked for my forgiveness and asked me to forgive both of you. She even asked me to help her get here." As we stood there, a man I'd only just met poked his head in the door and said, "I've got a chapel full of people waiting for a wedding. Can we start the music?" The women scrambled for about 30 seconds, and then Amanda said, start the music. An hour later, Lauren and Eric were married. And, to my amazement, Amanda and I were married too. I had the honor of walking Lauren down the aisle and marrying Amanda on the same day. At the reception, I danced with Lauren first and then with Amanda. A little while later, Carol approached me. "I believe it's traditional for the groom to dance with the mother of the bride," she said softly. "I missed out on that years ago because I was foolish. If you're willing to let me apologize for being such a fool, I'd like to make up for it now." We shared a slow dance, and at the end, Carol kissed me on the cheek, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God for waterproof mascara," she joked, wiping her eyes. "Oh, are you planning to get some?" I teased with a grin. For a moment, her face was horrified, but then she realized I was joking. We both laughed. As we walked off the dance floor, her arm around me and mine around her, it felt like a step toward mending years of tension. Now, if this were a fairy tale, it would end with, "They lived happily ever after." But this isn't a fairy tale. There have been times when Carol's controlling nature, built over 60 years, still prompts her to try to run things her way. And there have been moments when Amanda feels the urge to step into her mother's role when it comes to Andrew and Lauren. I've stepped into it a few times too, and I probably will again. But despite all that, we have lived happily ever after, so far. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.